Ghostly greetings, and welcome to the second episode of Spooky Boy and the Spirit Sisters, a podcast for the strange and unusual.
By the strange and unusual.
I am Lauren.
And I am Austin.
I'm Amanda. And I'm Cassidy.
And in tonight's episode, we'll be discussing ghost encounters, types of hauntings, and the different entities one can encounter. We briefly discussed some of our encounters last episode, but tonight we'll be going a little bit further with that, and we'll also be providing some of the research that we've gathered. Now, a lot of the stuff we are just going to barely scratch the surface on. Some of the topics in here we can just pick one topic and discuss it entirely in a whole other episode. But we're going to sum up as much as we can, and then in the episode notes, we'll provide all the links to our research and other books and podcasts and YouTube videos that one can watch if you want to further dive in on your own time. But before we go into that, we do want to preface and say that Spooky Boy and the Spirit Sisters does intend to go on our own paranormal investigations. We actually intended to do that a while ago before we even decided to do the podcast. However, COVID happened. 2020 happened. But once things open up some more, we do plan on going on investigations. We intend to cover those investigations in an episode. And then even further down the line, we do plan on having special guests who are paranormal investigators that have years and years of investigations under their belt. So let's get started. Last week we talked a bit about our spiritual awakenings, and a lot of our spiritual awakenings started from having visitations from family members or friends that had passed on. So tonight we're going to talk about the different types of hauntings there are. We're going to talk about the different entities and discarnates and spirits that can come and what can potentially cause a haunting or possession. So Austin's going to start us off. He actually researched the different types of hauntings.
Yeah, so there's four main different types of hauntings. You have residual, intelligent, inhuman, and poltergeist. So residual is basically pretty much what it sounds like. It's a loop. Think of a CD or a DVD, cassette player, or cassette tape, and it's basically just a time in history kind of thing that's consistently replaying over and over again, no matter if you're there or if you're not there, it's going to happen. Usually what happens with residual hauntings, what you'll see and notice is that no matter how much you try to interact with the spirit or the ghost or the entity, they're never going to notice you because it's more of an imprint of some type of emotion that like latched on to, I guess, a point in time. So they say like places that usually have high residual hauntings are areas with like heavy deposits of limestone. They say it captures that very well. And then, going past that, you have intelligent hauntings. So like last week when I prefaced that I started seeing my grandfather when I was like 3 years old, that was an intelligent haunting. He was very much aware of me. I mean, for the fact that he was talking to me and communicating with me. He kicked a laundry basket across the house. He would open and close doors, things like that.
So like what Amanda and I also experienced, I had my friend visit me like right after he passed, so we would classify that as like an intelligent haunting. Is it intelligent or intellectual?
Intelligent.
Okay. So an intelligent haunting.
Yeah. So like any kind of interaction that you have with it, that it is literally interacting with you or the environment. So it might not like look you dead in the eyes and talk with you kind of thing. But if you literally see objects in your environment moving, so like you have a cup on the table and that moves, That's not residual, because residual, once again, is energy imprinted in time that is repeating itself, and it cannot interact with anything around it. Intelligent knows its environment.
That's why they're intelligent.
Exactly. But let's preface, just because you call it intelligent doesn't mean that spirit is actually intelligent. It could be, could be a dumbass spirit. Let's be honest. Like, if the person wasn't too bright and it's when it was alive, it might carry that same kind of intelligence in the afterlife. But
me as a ghost.
Yeah, same.
Can you imagine being stuck in a loop though? Like, the worst. Is it usually a time loop where the ghost or spirit has died, or is it just is it just a time in their life that they just keep reliving?
Thank you for bringing that up, because so for going back to residual, it could be a very negative time in that person's life that was imprinted, or very joyous. Like, it doesn't actually have to correspond with purely this death or trauma that.
So, okay, sorry. With residual, could it be like something as simple as maybe somebody seeing just a soldier walking?
Yes.
But they're not like interacting with people or anything like that. It could just
exactly.
be
so
as simple as that.
I know if there's some of if you go to some of the fields where some of the civil war was fought and stuff like that, the Battle of Gettysburg, right? There's a ton of evidence of people standing there, and you can hear on their their camcorders and things like that, or their cell phones. You can hear cannons going off, gunshots going off. There's been images of soldiers walking the field, and it isn't that soul itself being trapped there. Like, it is just that big of an event of so much energy imprinting on its environment. So you'll have some people who will say, oh yeah, these spirits are trapped in that time loop. But a lot of paranormal investigators and people who really look into that, there's a lot of them that disagree with that. They believe it's just that imprint of energy and that's left there, but the soul itself isn't trapped there. So yeah, that's residual. And then intelligent, like I said, it's exactly how it sounds, is interact with its environment. So if you have, say at home, of anyone who's listening to this, if you're encountering doors opening and closing, objects moving, or you place something down, you go back a few seconds later and it's gone, right? That's intelligent, because it knows what it's doing and it can interact with you as well as in the environment. Now, a lot of people, out of fear, they believe a lot of the times these hauntings that are intelligent are negative in some sort, but it's not the case, because you'll be like, oh, it poked me, or it was shouting at me. Grant Wilson, who is where actually a lot of the information I got from this, he's one of the original founders of Ghost Hunters, like TAPS, from anyone who remembers that sci-fi TV show from 10, 15 years ago. But he was saying, you have to think about it as if this spirit's trying to get your attention, right? So it might try to move something, but you're still not paying any mind to it. So then it starts shouting your name. And yeah, sure, it might sound aggressive, but it's because it's like, hey, I'm here. Like, look at me. Pay attention to me. It's sort of like how we do it, as if we're trying to get someone's attention from across the room. You're going to yell their name. And if they don't hear you, you're going to shout it louder. And if they still don't hear you, you might go up to them and tap them on the shoulder.
Punch him in the face.
Or I was going to say throw something at them.
Or,
that's what I would say.
I guess that's the very aggressive way to go. But,
no chill.
But it's that whole thing. It's like, I totally understand, growing up with that, because most of my encounters with spirits have been intelligent. So it would be, it would scare you, because you don't you're seeing or you're hearing something that shouldn't be there, and it's just out of nowhere. Or you turn the corner and you see a door open, and you're like, no one's home, it's just me. Or you hear footsteps coming up and down the stairs, or feeling that someone's sitting on the edge of your bed, things like that. Like, those are intelligent hauntings. Now, sure, I do believe some of the entities that plagued me as a kid were not, Casper the Friendly Ghost, but I don't believe every single one of them were out there to be like, oh, we want to actually scare any of them.
So is residual activity, can that be aggressive or not normally?
No, not normally, because like residual, like even if it sounds aggressive, you got to remember that it can't harm you, because it's, like I said, it's that memory imprinted on time.
Okay.
So like another way to look at it is like you'll have stories where people will be like, I just saw this spirit, like it walked right past me, like if I wasn't even there, and walked through a wall, right? And they'll be like, what the hell? But yeah, that's most likely residual, because it has no idea you're there. And walking through the wall usually indicates that at some point there was like a doorway there or something that was open.
Think of all the houses that have been remodeled since then,
yeah,
and
exactly.
updates.
Mm-hmm.
So
Grant Wilson touched on a story like about one of his clients who was experiencing paranormal. One of the children of this family was very scared because she was like, my daughter's only seen literally the upper torso of this farmer, and he's just walking, and it's just literally his head, neck, and his arms and his chest. Well, they did research on the house and found out that originally there was a farmhouse underneath where that house had been built, because over time the earth eroded away, and so the foundation was sinking. Well, as that happened, basically where originally the farmhouse was and where the level of the house currently was, because of the new foundation, basically that's what it looked like. It looked like a floating torso.
that's spooky. That's terrifying.
Yeah, I don't know what I would do if I saw that.
That's kind of hot.
The floating farmhand.
I'd shit myself. To be honest, I'd probably shit myself.
And then, so you got intelligent, residual, and then you have like inhuman. So inhuman is exactly how it sounds, an entity or a spirit that was never actually human. So in pretty much most religious texts, at least from Catholicism and Christianity, you'll call them angels or demons. And then from some of the older traditions, they may refer to as elementals, things like that. So with the negative ones, you can pretty much tell what their intentions are. It's to essentially take you over. They want to drain you. They want your life force, because they cannot produce any of their own energy, because they're so far away from like source.
I actually was looking into astral projection because that's something that I've been experiencing. And what made me think about that is my contact with shadow people.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times they describe shadow people as being that way, where they're not human and they're just like this entity that is created. And one of the things that I saw is that they can be the essences or energy of like people who are having out-of-body experiences. So basically, my experience was that randomly one night, I went downstairs and it was just like any other night. And I'm going downstairs, I'm getting my glass of water, ready to go back upstairs, relax, watch the YouTubes. And I was in my kitchen and I got this really heavy feeling in my chest. And this like sensation came over me that someone was watching me. This like strange, ominous feeling. So I looked to my left into the living room, and just behind our couch, I saw this dark shadow. So my first thought was that, oh, it's just like my mom.
Does your mom usually give you that feeling? Do you get like a heavy weight on your chest whenever?
All the time. All the time. That's why I was like, it's my mom. But I call out to her and I'm like, so why are you just like standing there being all creepy and stuff? And there was no answer. So immediately I look in the living room. No one was there. So I go back to the kitchen and I just start doing jumping jacks. I'm running around because I'm like, maybe I'm just an idiot, and it was literally my own shadow. So the shadow ended up not moving. It was staying in place. So I'm like, oh shit, what? And I was overwhelmed with fear at this point. So I'm just standing there watching it. It didn't move, but as I got closer, I saw that the shadow looked to be hunched over. And its head was like facing down. And it wasn't completely obvious if it was a man or a woman. It was just this dark figure, but it didn't have any indications that it was feminine. So I run upstairs. I'm freaked the fuck out at this point. And I immediately messaged Lauren and Amanda.
I remember that text message.
Yeah, I remember being like, wait, what?
I'm like, I don't know who else to talk to about this, so I'm going to talk to my other spirit sisters. Cause
I was actually laying in bed next to Austin, too, and I was just like, well, Cassidy had a thing.
Yeah, I'm like, what do I do? I think there's like a shadow person in my house. Can you help me? So Lauren and Amanda end up eventually cleansing my entire house for me, which we kind of touched upon briefly in the last episode. And what I later realized is that I gave my mom this crystal, and it was an amethyst that I bought at Volo, which she was displaying on the hutch in the living room. And this is important because I bought this crystal at an antique mall that is rumored to be haunted. And whether you believe that it's actually haunted or not, it's an antique mall, so, you know, some spooky shit's probably going on in there. I don't know. And it's the same antique mall that I bought this fluorite at. And this fluorite, let me just tell you, okay, I got this thing, and it was in the building of the antique mall that is considered to have the most paranormal activity. It's where all the kids' toys and things are. And in this building, there's a small section of crystals. So I was like, all right, yeah, why not? It's a pretty fluorite, you know, it's green, it's got purple going through it. I like it. I'm going to buy it. So I bring this thing home, and right after, I noticed a lot of stuff was going on. So within like the span of a few weeks, one of my aunts passed away. My cat was really depressed. She was yowling all the time.
Oh.
Yeah, poor little bean. I almost didn't get on my flight to Vegas. I was the only person that they needed to find an available seat for. So it was just really weird stuff like that. I was having problems in my personal relationships all the time. I was arguing a lot. I was upset for no reason. I had zero motivation. I still kind of do, but that's besides the point. So I'm like, well, what do I do, you know, with this, like, crystal? Like, I think, like, this thing might be doing something weird. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, I don't think I ever cleansed it or did anything. So, again, I go to my spirit sisters, and I'm like, what do I do with this thing?
Always, always, always. Anything that you get from secondhand as a gift or anything, cleanse your shit.
Cleanse your shit. That is the moral of this podcast.
Sometimes even if you don't get it secondhand, just do it anyways.
This is a precaution.
It's
Yeah,
a
you
very
never
good
know.
idea. So they told me to, you know, put it in water for, you know, like a minute or so, just run it in water. So I did that. And immediately the fluorite turned from like a green-purple color to piercing pitch black. And I was like, guys, like, is this like normal?
And then Lauren and I both
Yeah.
proceed to say,
No.
Hell no.
you're gonna have to find the pictures of it, and we'll have to post it on our Insta, because you're not gonna believe it until you actually see it.
Yeah, you're gonna think it's two completely different stones, but it's not.
If anyone is science inclined and can tell us, if there's a scientific reason on why a fluorite would turn that way, please let us know.
Yeah, I'm really curious.
Sherry's still out on that.
I buried it in the front yard under the moon, and I left it there for about a month because I was too scared to bring it into the house again. So I checked one day, and it was gone, so I'm just assuming that, like, a landscaper took it or something. But, yeah, I do not have good luck with buying crystals. And I also gave Lauren a box of things that I had in my room. And she experienced a lot of negative shit after that, too, so I'm sorry.
Moral of the story, don't buy crystals from haunted antique malls. And don't take crystals from Cassidy when she gives them to you freely.
Yeah, that was my bad.
So, yeah, I also have had a lot of shadow people, like, encounters. Mostly, I mean, part of it could be a part of my gifts because I see shadows a lot easier than the normal person. But this one actually happened recently, and I've told you guys this story. In March, I went to go see my dad in my hometown, and I come home, and my mom told me that she saw a shadow in the hallway. And my mom has never said that she says she sees shadows sometimes, but it's out of the corner of her eye. But this one, she saw dead on, like, she was in her bed and she saw it. She didn't tell me about it over the weekend because she didn't want to bother me with it. But literally, I think it was like, was it before or after I went to my dad's that I saw it?
You saw yours before you went to dad's, and then you weren't at the house when your mom saw it.
Yes, that's right.
But your house also, the first time the three, as in like Amanda, Cassidy, and I, went to Amanda's house for the first time we ever been there, first time we stepped foot in the house, like, you could feel stuff in your house. Mm-hmm. Like, and it's always just out of the corner of your eye. You feel like something's watching you, and you feel like you see things.
And then when you turn your head, it's not there.
So, right off the bat, I knew there was something going on, and you also had explained that you had stuff. Yeah. So, and now, the more and more you're awakening, this stuff is, like, kicking into gear, and now you're starting to see actual activity.
Yeah, and like I said, and I totally forgot the story, but I saw it a couple days before I left for my dad's, and I was laying in bed, lights were off, I had my TV on, but I looked where my door is in the corner, and I saw this shadow, and at first I thought it was my shadow, but I was like, wait, no, that can't be my shadow. Like, there's the only light that's coming in my room is my TV. Like, why would my shadow go that way? My shadow would go behind me.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking when I saw that shadow person in my house.
And so, and I wear glasses, so I'm in the dark especially, I'm blind. And
as most people are.
Yeah. But my eyes don't adjust as quickly as most people. So it could take hours for my eyes to adjust. And I like squint my eyes a little bit, and I'm like, okay, let's figure this out. There has to be a reason. But then there wasn't a reason. And I saw this shadow, and it was about the height of my grandma when she passed away. And at first I was thinking, oh, okay, well, maybe it's her. But she never appears in a shadow. I can feel her around. Like, I don't see her. And so I didn't say anything to anyone other than my friends here. But then my mom told me that she saw this, and it was the same height that I had said. And I was like, okay, so my mom is seeing this stuff now. And like, oh no.
Well, the thing that that kind of tipped us off that it might not actually be your grandma, because you've been visited by your grandmother a couple times,
Yeah.
but for it to be an actual shadow, like a corporeal
full
shadow in
on like
front of
silhouette
you,
of a person.
That's a huge leap from what we've heard of the stories that you've had before.
Yeah.
So, and then when you couple that with, oh, well, now we start smelling cigarette smoke, shadow and cigarette smoke put together, like, it kind of raises a bunch of red flags.
Yeah. Well, and another thing we do, like not that we do, but we feel is my grandma is the cigarette smoke, like sometimes, but it's like different. Like it's a different smell of cigarette smoke, like a different brand essentially. So it just, after I like figured out, I was like, oh no, this isn't my grandma. Like,
To jump in really quick, so when you feel your grandmother's presence around, how do you feel?
Normally I feel very, very, very anxious, like on a daily basis, because I have really bad anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
But when my grandma's around, I'm calm.
Okay.
Like, I don't feel anxiety. It feels like someone puts their hand on my shoulder, telling me that everything's going to be okay.
So basically, whenever she's around, regardless if you know she is or not, but you'll just get that calming effect.
Yeah.
Now, when the shadow figure is around, regardless if you see it or smell it, like, how do you feel?
I don't know. It's like, at first, yes, I felt calm, but then that changed.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's what you need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
your
because I was going to
intuition.
say, like, one of the things that, they usually say if it's like a positive energy, like, you won't really ever feel like anxious, things
Yeah.
like that. So like that's why I wanted to see how you felt.
yeah,
Because have you asked your mom how she feels when it's around?
We didn't really talk too much about it because she
Okay.
was a little freaked out by it.
I mean, granted, yeah.
Yeah, but I brushed upon like how I felt about it with her, and she was like, "Yeah, I kind of felt that," but that was it.
She felt uneasy.
A little bit,
Okay.
but for me, like, being able to tell like whether something is good or bad, I have like a specific like routine that goes through my head. Like, immediately anxiety will hit,
Mm-hmm.
and then if my stomach like drops, that means it's not good. If it stays normal, then there's that chance that it's good.
And these things probably do try to disguise themselves,
Yeah.
as familiar people in your life in order to get you to be open and vulnerable to them.
Yeah.
Well, when Austin was seeing things when he was young, I mean, didn't they start coming and trying to be like, let's like play with us?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Oh, well, if you want me to jump back into the negative and human, I have a story for you guys. So, like everyone else, I've seen my own like shadow people growing up in my house. Sometimes it'd just be like I'd go wake up in the middle of the night, go to the bathroom, and there would be them sort of like darting from my living room into my kitchen and dissipate. Then there other ones you sort of see like in the hallway, sort of peeking around like a doorway. The worst encounter I've ever had with a shadow person in particular, or I guess I should say shadow people, was one night I woke up, and I think I was like 13, and I just woke up in the middle of the night, and I saw these two silhouettes that looked exactly like my parents' silhouettes, and I literally thought it was my parents standing at the edge of my bed, just like looking at me. So I like woke up, and I was like started laughing a little bit, and I was like, Mom, Dad, what are you guys doing? And I got no response. And as I was like staring at them, I realized that there was no features. There was nothing but just the silhouette that mimicked my parents. And that was pretty much when my heart leapt out of my damn body. And I like rolled out of the bed like in a panic, like flopped on the ground and scurried out of my bedroom, like running into my parents' bedroom. Cause like part of it was like oh, my parents will save me. But the other part was like, did I see what I saw, and are they in their room? Or was it them and they're just being assholes kind of thing? And no, they were dead asleep, and my dad nearly whooped my ass because he used to have to wake up at like 4 a.m. So he was like, Austin, it is 2:30 in the morning. What are you doing? And here I am like, you guys, like, what? Like trying to get my words together while I'm shivering because I'm in such a like frenzy of what I just witnessed. And so that was probably my worst encounter with like shadow entities. But prefacing back into a really negative in humans, I used to have, me and my sister believe we were at one point visited by like what stereotypical Hollywood and Christianity and Catholicism and other religions might quote as a demon. Visit her and I. It would take on different forms of, basically for me it was a little boy, for her it was a little girl. And at first it seemed nice. It was like playing with us. It wanted to be our friend, and all of that, until it started trying to convince us to go and do things that would, get us in trouble. Basically start turmoil with my mom and my father. And then basically try to get them to punish us and all of that. So, like, it would actually play with my sisters, like Barbie dolls and stuff like that. And my mom would wake up at like 1 or 2 in the morning, and she would hear giggling, like a little girl giggling in my sister's bedroom. And she would storm in my sister's room thinking she was awake at this time playing with her Barbies. Because she would walk in, my sister would be dead ass asleep in her bed, but the Barbie dolls would be scattered on the floor after she put them away before she went to sleep. So at first my mom would just think my sister was, BSing, and would hear my mom get up or my parents get up, and she would dart back in her bed and pretend she was asleep. But she wasn't doing that. And every time my mom would scold her, she'd be like, no, it's not me. It's the little girl. It's the little girl spirit. I tell her not to do it because she's going to get me in trouble like she's doing now, but she keeps doing it. And then for me, it was sort of like my Hot Wheels toys or my G.I. Joe action figures or my stuffed animals that, if anyone remembers, for like you guys out there ever have those like those nets that you would hang up on your ceiling?
Oh, I had one of those.
And you would put all your toys and your big stuffed animals and stuff up there.
Spiders would creep in there, and you'd wake up in the morning, and one would be dangling from one of them, and you're like, gotta set them on fire now.
That's oddly specific.
Yeah, I was going to say.
No, nobody else.
That only happened to you, I think.
PTSD flashbacks over here.
But, yeah, like, it would do the same thing, and it sort of became a routine with this thing that it would do that. And after, my dad was sort of a skeptic for a pretty long time with it all, until he basically wrote it all off as that me and my sister had an imaginary friend and we were just being creative, right? But that changed when this entity at one point tried to push my dad down the stairs. Like, he actually felt physical force at the top of the stairs, and he almost actually fell. Like, it was that strong enough of a force to try to harm him. Normally with intelligent hauntings, even if they do linger more into being malevolent, it's a pretty weak push that would be more of like a little like tap that you normally would feel. When you get into these inhuman ones, they have much stronger energy that they can pull from their surroundings, basically you, and they can harness that into an actual like physical harm. So like deep scratches, cuts, bite marks, things like that. So this thing pretty much got worse and worse to the point where we actually called in our local priest to come in and bless the house. And that sort of put a damper on it for a little bit. But I think it was because my dad didn't truly believe it. Even when we were trying to claim back our house, it never really got rid of it. It took, I think it was me and my sister combined, where we were both consistently ignoring this thing, even though we were fearful because it was threatening to basically hurt us all the time and hurt my family, like if we didn't do things. And at this time, at its height, my dad was having literally panic attacks, nightmares, all that stuff. There was a point where my mom literally woke up and she was like, your dad was flailing around in his sleep.
I do that naturally.
Like, yeah, that's true. But like he could barely breathe, and she actually could not move him. And she said that like there literally felt like someone was holding him down and basically trying to like take him over, you know, because like he was the head of the house. So this thing was trying to basically wear my dad down so that it could essentially take him over. Now with that spooky story, there are, like I said, there are positive ones, you know, when people feel like that ease, that calm, just that light around them. You know, sometimes you'll hear people being like, I saw an angel. That will be sort of what those positive ones are. Those ones you want to keep in your life, because usually those tend to just really help your life out. And then you have the elemental, which some folklore will call them fairies.
The fae.
The fae. And those ones, they could care less about you. They only care about themselves. They're just in it for themselves. Like, if you're sort of in the way, they might be like annoy you to try to piss you off to get you out of their way. But a lot of the times it's just for what they want.
Naturally. So elementals, they do, a lot of them come from, like, in history, the fae, the fae folk, different Celtic mythologies, all of them have the story of the fae in there. And even in Arthurian legend, I keep hitting my mic. Even in Arthurian legend, you know, you've got the fae in there, and even once upon a time, druids were referred to as the fae folk. So there's a lot of history of elementals just being called different names. Some different kinds of elementals, like there's tricksters. There's, you know, you've got your fairies, your cute little pixies. You've got your gnomes, your puka, there are a bunch of people. There are a bunch of different types. And
okay, what is a puka? I've heard that term like 3 different times tonight. Like, this is the first time you said it on the podcast, but like 2 other times today.
So to quickly sum up, and we'll do a whole episode on fae folk and folklore and whatnot, but a puka is a kind of trickster spirit. It usually dwells in the forest. Once it finds a place that it calls its home, it stays there, and it kind of like guards it and protects it. Its main focus is to make sure that the forest that it lives in is remaining alive, that the dwellings in it are safe, and that it's like a forest spirit.
Doesn't it shapeshift?
Yes, and it is a shapeshifter. So people have seen it come in the form of a horse, a goat, a rabbit, and a lot of times too, it'll come in a form of a human, but it'll have other features. So like if you see it coming to you as a human, people have had accounts of where it has like goat horns or horns that look like branches coming out of its head, you know? And a lot of those stories overlap. Because, you know, when you hear a description like that, you've also got Pan, you've got, you know, the pagan horned god that's similar to it. So a lot of those stories overlap and intertwine with one another. But yes, shapeshifter, it's a trickster, and it's in a lot of folklore. You've got Russian, you've got Celtic, you've got Norse. So, but yeah, elementals are, and a lot of them do coincide with the elements. So you've got like the forest fairies or the forest elementals. You've got water sprites, you know, there's the fire ones, there's all different kinds. So, but they're an actual thing. I'm actually convinced that we've got a couple of them living around the house, lurking around the house, especially in my, I did a fairy garden that actually looks like a hobbit hole. and it's got Bilbo playing on the outside, and I'm fairly certain that we've got a couple of elementals playing around in that thing. So,
Hey, as long as they don't cause any harm, they're welcome to stay. I don't care.
you know, it's not, and a lot of the
Could
times...
they be the reason why Banks hasn't died yet? Because we're the worst plant parents?
They probably, yeah, that's probably why they showed up. You're like, you're killing your house plant, and we're here to take over. So, I tried being a plant mom, and it didn't work out. I mean, he's still alive, but...
I don't know how.
If it makes you feel any better, I can't keep plants alive either.
Yeah,
I mean,
neither
I have
can
a green thumb because, like, I grew up helping my mom garden, you know? I did that for, like, 16 years of my
Our
life.
house plant would say otherwise.
Well, yeah, I know. I got really lazy.
But they can be more lighthearted, though. You know, it's usually when you see something that's misplaced, like, oh, I put my keys down here, and now all of a sudden they're over there, or I misplaced a pen or a pencil, something like that.
Would you say that, like, the Fae and gnomes come out more with children?
Definitely. Because when you think about it, children are at that pure form. Like, they don't have all of the concerns that we have as adults, you know, or as teenagers. You know, think of how many times when you were young playing with your Barbies or your G.I. Joes. You know, you can just sit there and they
Good
talk
old
with
Kendall.
they talk with one another. They have these full-on stories, and then when you get older, you look down at those toys and you go, "You're just plastic." You know,
That's deep.
it's like when you're young, you're more in tune to seeing stuff like that. And I know I saw stuff when I was little. Like, once I was a grown adult and I looked back on the stuff, I was just like, oh my gosh, yes, I was seeing things. Like, I would talk to the trees, and I had names for all the trees in our front yard. I'd talk to the plants in the back. Like, I even still, to this day, I talk to animals, and I yell at spiders to get out of the way. Like,
Yeah, I do that too.
so it coincides with that. You've got that innocence when you're so young. So, but that, yeah, an elemental would be another type of entity that wasn't human at one point.
Mm-hmm.
But going with having that intellectual haunting with the spirits and entities that were humans, through my research, I've also heard them called disincarnates, where they were alive at one point. And now, when you have a soul that hasn't moved on, there could be countless reasons why that soul hasn't moved on. And it could be either they're holding on to their loved ones, and they don't want to move on yet. They want to stay behind and kind of guide them, watch them. Or sometimes it's, you know, maybe there's something that they couldn't accomplish in their life before they passed, and they just never moved on because they're so determined to accomplish. Casper, the Friendly Ghost, that movie, back in the 90s, it was like, they're finished business. Like, I have unfinished business.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of the times, the soul's trapped here because they're so determined, like, no, I have to get this done. And they tend to find someone who has a similar, like, path, I guess. Or sometimes the souls are trapped here because they're lost. They don't realize what has happened. They don't know what's going on. And that's when things can tend to get a little more confusing, because they latch onto something that's familiar to them, whether it's a person, a place, or even an item. You know, that's where you get, like, items that are possessed or linked to things, you know. Cassidy was talking about when she went to Volo and she got this, like, she got her crystals from there, and immediately she brought it home, and she was just like, what the hell's going on? Like, there is residual energy that is placed onto certain items. And again, we're going to say this a lot because we're still in the early stages of our podcast, but in another episode, we're going to talk about energy and possessions and stuff like that. But there are sacred metals, and I can't think of at the top of my head what all 7 of those sacred metals are, but it is easy for things to attach itself. They leave like an attachment or like some sort of cord wrapped around it. And it either takes someone who knows what they're doing to be able to cleanse that area, cleanse the object to help that other entity move on to that next side. And 2, with that, when a soul tends to latch onto someone who either reminds them of someone who was living, or say they have a quirk or a quality that they like, one of the things that you can pick up on is if you didn't have an addiction once before and all of a sudden you go, hey, I'm going to pick up a cigarette and I'm going to start smoking. Like, a lot of the times it's because that soul that is kind of like latched onto you, they had addictions when they were alive, and it's kind of like you're picking up that addiction that they had. So it's...
That's interesting, because my friend who passed, he was a smoker, and I talked about him in the last episode, and I never smoked before that point until after his passing. So, I don't know, that's kind of weird. I was just thinking about that now.
Yeah, I never thought about it, too. Or if you start experiencing emotions... Now, it might be different for empaths, because empaths are always picking up on other people's emotions.
We're very hypersensitive to that.
Yeah. Especially when you're working retail.
Oh.
We feel for you out there.
Yes.
We understand.
Uh-huh.
But say you're sitting in a room and you're watching TV and all of a sudden you're like, I'm so pissed off right now.
Yeah.
Like, now, skepticism, it could be emotions, or it could be hormones. Like, take into account actual, feasible, realistic things, but another thing could be that it's something you're picking up from the entity that's there.
Mm-hmm.
So if that person, say for example, a soul passes before they got what they wanted to do accomplished, and they've just so happened to latch onto you for one reason. If they're a smoker and they're just pissed off all the time because, they want to get this done, if they latch onto you, all of a sudden you're going to notice that, I'm just angry all the time, and I just, the idea of smoking really appeals to me, and I never really had the urge to pick up a cigarette before, but now I'm going to. Like, so yeah, if you find that all of a sudden you're feeling all these weird things, I mean, sure, it could be emotions that you're having, it could be hormones or whatever's going on, stress in your life, but you could potentially have a ghost.
Yeah. I want to go back to spirits being here for a reason, like that they're stuck here for a reason, or they're with this person for a reason. Well, something that I learned is there is a type of spirit called a messenger ghost. And an example, which I was surprised to learn this, that banshees are actually considered messenger ghosts.
I want to go into banshees in an episode, because I find them fascinating.
Me too. And basically a banshee can appear as a family member or just anyone that you've met before. And they could be here for a reason. They could be here to warn you of something. It could be like a death of a family member. Like, not just your traditional, like, banshees, they scream at you like they show in the movies or TV shows. Yeah, banshees are like a big one with that.
I've only ever heard of banshees as like an omen, almost,
They-
like them
yeah,
being a
they're
harbinger
also-
of something to come. But
Yeah.
that's interesting. I've never.
Yeah, they could be that. They could be, like, here for a message. So if any of you are wondering what a banshee is basically a supernatural being that can be Irish and Celtic. Yes, they do the wailing and the screaming, but it's usually just, like Lauren said, it's kind of like an omen or a message that they're trying to get across that basically is just warning you of a possible death of a family member or something along those lines. They're usually female. I didn't see anything about them being male, but it is possible. So, yeah, those are considered messenger ghosts.
All right, everybody. Let's talk about Post Malone for a second.
Excuse you?
You heard me.
Facepalm.
So, but before we get to good old Posty,
Let's get weird, boy.
I just want to touch a little bit on different spirits that will inhabit objects. So one of the most famous ones is the Dybbuk box. And Dybbuk is Yiddish for malicious spirit. So it's basically the spirit that inhabits a wine box or a wine cabinet. And it became popular in 2012 when Kevin Manis listed it on eBay. And he purchased it from the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor who then brought it to Spain after leaving Poland. And this box was filled with many, many random objects. There was a rosebud, a candle holder, a small wine goblet, locks of hair, and a couple pennies from the 1920s, a little random.
And a hot plate.
People who made contact with this box, they experienced a lot of different things. They had night terrors, welts, hair loss, strokes. They were coughing up blood, all this nasty stuff. And good old Zach Baggins. Yeah, I'm waiting for it. Go ahead. Just say it now, Lauren.
All I'm going to say is he's not my favorite person.
All right.
That's all I'm going to say about that.
We don't like Zach Baggins here, I guess.
He's a TV personality. We'll just leave it at that.
So Zachy, he took ownership of this Dybbuk box and to display at his museum. So this is where Post Malone comes into the story. He went to the museum and actually touched Baggins on the shoulder during his trip while he was holding the Dybbuk box. And he thinks that this was enough to pass the curse on to him. Because after that happened, Post Malone had 3 armed robbers that tried to target his home. He had a car accident with his Rolls Royce. And his private plane had to make an emergency landing.
I remember hearing about this.
Oh, it would definitely be a bad day for me if my private plane and my Rolls Royce were experiencing difficulties.
Now, is there actual is there evidence, like actual substantial evidence behind this box? So, like you talked about the first person who initially purchased it on eBay. Is there actual documentation behind this of belonging to someone who survived the Holocaust? Or is this just something that was sort of lore that was passed on? I guess it's just for the skeptic in me.
I mean, you can buy Cheez-Its on eBay that look like Jay Leno's head. Like,
yeah, I mean, eBay's not the most reliable source, and I know that a lot of people since this famous incident have tried to list their own Dybbuk boxes on eBay
and possessed dolls
and with just a bunch of crap they found in their basement, But I'm not really sure about if they have documentation to support this. I mean, it is a very famous thing, and I mean, I'm sure if Zach Baggins is in on it, it's got to be legit.
Well, I remember from the episodes they were talking about how there's 6 or 7 Dybbuk boxes that this woman that survived the Holocaust made. So who knows? I mean, they could be real, they could not be real.
So if this thing is so for the one that was purchased and moved to person, and you're talking about a potentially 7 in total that were made, like, why would someone intentionally
Sell it?
like
Well,
try to pass on something that was like cursed? Like I guess that's my thought process is like the whole thing is what there's like a negative entity attached to this,
yeah.
and wherever it goes, it stays with that and basically causes chaos in somebody's life.
Right.
But like,
Yeah.
who would, especially someone who survived such a traumatic experience?
Like, if you think there's something so negative in this box, why would you sell it to someone? Why wouldn't you give it to someone who knows?
Why would you bury
like,
it?
Where's Ed and Lorraine when you need them? Like,
Right, yeah.
why
Rip.
not give it to a person or people who are like, hey, we specialize in containing these sorts of entities, or we know how to cleanse these things.
I think at one point they were with people like down the road, and then they just ended up with Zach.
Yeah, Zach wasn't the original owner of it. He got it as a gift from somebody else.
The guy who owned it before him that was taking care of it gave it to him because he didn't want it anymore or something
Well, yeah,
like that.
I wouldn't want that either.
But
you know what? I have this gift that I want to get off my hands. Who's the most annoying person in the world I can give it to?
No, well,
Zach
because
Baggins.
Zach owns that. He has that.
haunted museum.
Yeah,
in
he like
Vegas.
turned a house that he bought, and he's turned it into like basically
kind
this-
of like a bigger version of Ed and Lorraine Warren's museum.
yeah, like
that they had.
and then you can actually like walk through it and all that stuff. Because I remember there was like an actual like Vegas news like report on it that they like interviewed and
they've
took
done
the trip on and stuff like that.
Like, I've seen every episode of Ghost Adventures.
Holy moly!
I have.
Why didn't you start with that? Hi, my name's Amanda. I'm the baby of the group, and I know more than you.
I
But
love Ghost
I've
Adventures.
seen every episode of Ghost Adventures.
multiple times.
These are my credentials.
But they've done like live investigations of the museum, and the last room that they ever go into is the Dybbuk box room, because it's the heaviest item that they own, and not like weight wise, but like spirit wise. And yeah, Zach makes it very dramatic.
We've seen episodes of it, and a lot of that is psychology
It's
that goes into it.
Yeah,
super entertainment.
It is entertainment, but with people who are interested in the paranormal and people who are interested in actually looking at this stuff, you have to have that dose of skepticism.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and you have to take everything with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
And when I watch, because I've seen episodes of where people are like, we're going to this museum and it's great. And people who actually take a camera with you, the more and more you look into it, they build up so much. And a lot of that is just them pumping you full of this, like, it's going to happen, something spooky's going to happen, we're going to show you this thing, but you have to sign a waiver, and we're not responsible for anything. If somebody hands me a piece of paper and is like, you have to sign this waiver before you do anything, and we're not responsible for anything that happens after, like, immediately, my anxiety's going to be up, and I'm going to be on edge. It could just be going for a haircut. Like, I'm going for a haircut. Sign this waiver. We're not responsible if she draws blood. Like, then you bet your ass I'm not going to a haircut with that person. Like, so a lot of that is immediately, like, we're planting this seed that something might happen.
And your adrenaline goes up, and you start to see things because you're like, oh, I'm going into this, and I'm going to see something, and then your eyes play games with you. And your head plays games
and
with
you immediately start.
I'll sign that waiver. I'll be like, give it to me, sign it, show me something, let's go.
And when we eventually do our own paranormal investigations, and you know, we have to also use that. You know, is that because we've done it in circle where the wind blows through the window and you hear that whistling sound and all of us jump going, what was that?
Okay, by all of them, they mean the three of them. And I'm like, it's the wind. You know, like, but it sounded like a whistle. I'm like, yeah, because it's the wind going through a windscreen.
Austin's our token skeptic.
Yeah.
I mean,
He keeps us grounded here.
Yeah, we're all pretty 50-50, but Austin's the skeptic.
It doesn't help that you have a roommate that literally whistles all the time in the basement.
Yeah, that's true. We'll be dead silent. Next thing you hear is...
He comes
You're
home.
like,
Shout out to you, Andrew.
Yeah.
What up, Andrew?
If you're listening, Andrew, we love your whistling, but it scared us the first couple times.
It's a little creepy.
But, you know, you have to take that skepticism. Like, say we're in a building and we hear something. Is it paranormal? Is it a homeless person? Is it an animal in the attic? Like, all of these things have to be taken into account. Yeah, all of the above. It's the ghost of a homeless person who had a pet raccoon. Like,
it's a busy spirit.
Hey.
I think we covered pretty much, like, inhuman, intelligent, and residual quite a bit. I would say the last one is poltergeist that we can go into, which I have to say I really always thought was just a bunch of disgruntled spirits messing with you and stacking chairs and
great
moving
movie.
things.
Right.
Yeah, but through the research for this, most poltergeists are actually caused by a living person.
Yeah.
It's energy emanating off of that, like one individual or multiple individuals in a home or a space that they don't even know that they're doing. But there's been scientific research done on poltergeist, and they've attached, like, I don't know, equipment to people's, basically to scan their brains during activities of spikes. And during objects being moved, brain activity spikes. And then that object literally corresponds right at that exact moment that they see it on live data. So that blew my mind because I literally always thought poltergeists were, just like I said, disgruntled spirits.
Yeah.
When you were listening to, or when you were doing your research for it, I was listening to it, and I can't remember the name. Grant Wilson?
Yeah,
Is that
Grant
it?
Wilson, yeah.
But I thought it was interesting, which we should definitely look more into. One of the things he said was there was a
premenstrual?
spike. Yeah, there was a spike in women that
menopausal?
were just starting their periods and who were menopausal.
Most poltergeists surround women, the study has found.
Yes!
Basically, Grant Wilson said, he's like, I guess you could say women are more powerful than men.
Damn straight.
So, but I'm sure Lauren can dive deeper into all of that. But yeah, no, I thought that was really interesting, the fact that a lot of the times it is not tied to spirits. It's literally a person in a house causing the chaoticness inside their environment. And like another thing he had mentioned, sometimes it could be where they create like a tulpa or a thought form. So a tulpa is basically, in your mind, you're giving power to something that you're creating. So think of, like, say you're thinking of like a totem pole. Just stick with me. And you're constantly giving that totem pole, like, that it has ability to do its own will. It can think on its own. It has its own free will. And you're constantly thinking that this thing is truly real. Apparently in some cultures, they truly believe in tulpas. And they've used them for their own kind of means to either mess with their enemies or help their community out and things like that. And then a thought form has no free will. It's basically like, think of your intention, but your intention is so strong for whatever it is that you're literally putting that out and manifesting it in your environment. And that energy can mess with things. So yeah, no, it's really weird.
I think there was an X-Files episode where they did a thing on tulpas.
Hell yeah, there was. X-Files is the best.
I also got some stuff on poltergeist. What really surprised me was what Austin said, that it's usually someone, like a human that's living. Yeah, it's me. Newsflash, it's me. But someone unknowingly controlling it that's alive. Like, and this term poltergeist is thrown around like so quickly. They're like, oh yeah, it's poltergeist. Half the time it's not.
My question is, when is a poltergeist, and when is it actually someone using energy to actually do something?
From what I've noticed, in the many, many shows that I watch, is it only happens when the people that it's like doing it to are in the house. And it doesn't happen when they're not.
Okay, because like when I was going through one of the parts of my awakening, I actually had a bunch of stuff happen, but I knew it wasn't a spirit doing it. I knew it wasn't any sort of entity doing it. I knew, like, I was very much aware that I was doing it. Like, once upon a time when me and a close friend of mine were getting into, like a really heated argument. Like, to the point where I was yelling on the phone. And I was in my apartment, and all of a sudden, the light bulbs started actually, like, exploding.
Poltergeist.
But no, here's the thing. Like, they were exploding. And then, to the point where I was just like, okay, whatever, it was a power surge. But I was still pissed off, and I was still on the phone. And all of a sudden, my grandparents come into my room, and they're like, what the hell is happening right now? The light bulbs in our rooms are exploding. Like, Grampy had stuff exploding in his bathroom. Nana was downstairs and something happened. And I was like, oh shit. I told my friend, I'm like, I gotta go. I'm apparently carrying the house right now. I hung up on him. So, and it wasn't just that point. There was a bunch of times where I noticed things like that would happen. I fried my computer. I accidentally fried my computer once. Because I was agitated, I was stressed out, and I would listen to my computer for music because I didn't have, like, an external stereo, and a song came on my shuffle that reminded me of an ex that I wasn't very fond of. And I remember just shouting at my computer, I'm like, could you not? And all of a sudden, my computer gave me the blue screen of death, and it actually started smoking.
This is some Matilda shit.
Yeah. And
real.
I was just like, son of a bitch, I loved that computer.
Yeah, but honestly, that's
Like-
pretty much everything you described is pretty much what poltergeist.
Yeah, they describe poltergeist as a built-up.
You hear that,
built
babe?
up
I'm a
energy
force to be reckoned with.
that needs to expel
Yeah.
itself, and then all of a sudden everything happens at once. Like the light bulbs start bursting, and then your laptop gives you the blue screen of death after you yell at it. Like, it's just a burst of energy that needs to expel itself. So that could be from what you said, or it could be from throwing things, or moving things, or making really loud noises. And it's, everything you said, poltergeist.
So another thing I want to touch on is that spirits can sometimes communicate by other means, such as EVP, which is an electronic voice phenomenon. And that's when they use radio noise to form words or like short phrases through static. And it reminded me of a story that I have. As I think I talked about in the last episode, I have really bad tinnitus. So I got this sound machine, I think at Brookstone years ago, and I was using it at night to help me go to sleep, to block out the tinnitus sounds. And this thing was going, and it had a bunch of different settings, and I picked ocean waves. So normally it just sounds like, I can't really do an ocean wave sound, but it's kind of like, yeah, exactly like that.
Makes you have to pee every 12 seconds.
Yep. And so this sound would just kind of go on for a while, and then after about an hour or so, it would repeat. And I was lying in bed, and all of a sudden, while I'm listening to my ocean waves, I hear the sound of children laughing. And it just cuts. And all of a sudden, I hear something out of a fucking horror movie. These kids laughing. And it's just like,
Yeah, kids are cute, but not when
they're
3
not
in the
right
morning
in front of
and-
you, laughing at you or something around you.
Children of the Corn.
yeah.
That's what
It
they called us when we were in
was-
Johnsburg.
It
That's what they
was
called us too.
terrifying. And I was really confused. So I sat there for a bit, and I'm just listening to this, and it's not stopping. So I get up, and I eventually turn the sound machine off because I'm like, hell no. And I play it again, and I start it on ocean waves, and I let it go for like probably 20 minutes. And no, doesn't sound anything like that. Just normal, like whooshing sounds, like and I was terrified. So I turned it off. I went to the guest bedroom and I threw that fucker in the closet. And I have not touched it since. So I'm kind of curious if you guys have had any experiences with sound machines or white noise.
Not sound machines. When right after my friend passed away, one of the big things he would do to reach out to us is, so he was a huge Queen fan, like absolutely loved Queen, loved Freddie Mercury, like, which, side note, Freddie Mercury and I share the same birthday, September 5th, so.
Can we take a second to let people know that as we're recording this, tomorrow is Lauren's birthday. So happy birthday to Lauren.
Happy birthday, baby.
Thank you. But he would always, whenever, one of the signs that we knew that he was listening to us, or whenever, we were kind of like, oh, we really miss him, wonder if he's still around. Somebody to Love would come up on the radio. Somebody to Love by Queen.
Good song.
And, oh, it's amazing. It's still, like, it makes me cry because I miss him so much, still to this day. But it's not a song that you heard on the radio often. And then it was like, he passed away, and you heard it on the radio all the time. Which I know that a lot of that has to do with, like, the psychology behind it and grieving. But one of the big things was, I was driving, at the time, a 97 Jeep Grand Cherokee, maroon, rust bucket. And every now and then, the stereo would completely dip out. It would just be complete static. And one time I was driving home, and I had a friend with me, and we were listening to the radio, and all of a sudden, like, the static hit again. So we were like, okay, just wait a minute, it'll come back, And the static lasted a little bit longer than usual. So we were like, oh, okay, well, there goes the radio. But then, just faintly, over the static, you hear Freddie hit that chord in the very beginning. And it's a very, very iconic opening. And the more and more we got closer and closer to where we were headed, the sound just built and built and built and built. And it was Somebody to Love playing on the radio. And we were like, what? And then, to top it off, as if that wasn't weird enough, when it finally reached to where it was just pure Somebody to Love on the radio, we look out the window as I'm driving by, and we drive past his home, his childhood home. And we were like, huh, okay, yep, that happened. There's another person in the car, they're hearing the same thing, so it's It's a thing. And it's not the first time and only time that ever happened. That's happened multiple times. And every time it's always somebody to love. So, but stereo, songs on the radio was always a way that my friend would communicate with us.
I kind of want to go into, before we finish this, there's another kind of spirit, and a lot of people see them. I think they're the most controversial type of spirit, and that's orbs. Because the reason they're controversial is because you can make it off as a bug or dust or
a gleam off of
a camera or a flash or something like that. But basically an orb is just a translucent or transparent ball of light that is hovering above the ground. They can be the soul of a human or an animal even. It's basically what they're doing is traveling from one place to the other. And usually orbs show up because the spirit isn't strong enough to become a full-bodied apparition.
But it could become an orb? What?
Yeah, it's weird.
If I could choose between being in my body or being in an orb, I'd sure as shit be an orb.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's going to be easier, yeah, sure.
I don't have to worry about what to wear.
Yeah, and when you look at like a true orb, it's going to be a circular shape. And the reason for that is it makes it easier for them to travel, as opposed to like it being like a rectangle or something
trapezoid.
Like that.
I'm a parallelogram today.
And a lot of people have said that it can also be the beginnings of a transition. It can be the beginnings of that, like, transitioning them from, like, the human world to the spirit world, or a transition into becoming a full-bodied apparition. Yeah.
So, like, could a loved one that passed take the form of an orb?
Yep. Yeah. It could literally be anyone.
Now, when I've heard, because I haven't done too much into, like, I haven't looked too much into orbs, I've heard that more times than not, the orbs that people are like, no, it's legit, they usually have a color attached to them. White orbs, not so much, because those can be more debunked, if that's the right word. But
yeah, and I was leading into that, funny enough.
Sorry, I didn't mean to step on your toes.
Oh, no, you good. You gave me a really good transition there. So, yeah, they can be white, they can be transparent, or they can be colored. And if they're clear, or, clear, transparent, but you can still kind of see a glow, that usually means that it's a sign that, like, an entity or a past loved one is trying to contact you. But they don't really know how. It could be trying to let you know of a significant event that has happened in the past or is about to happen. And it could also even mean that a spirit wants help moving on. So I found that really interesting. If it's white or like a silvery type of color, it usually means that the connection that orb has is a part of a higher source. So it could be like an angel, a guardian, or like
some sort of guide.
Yeah, it could be a guide. It is believed that it's an indication also that a spirit could be trapped. There's many different meanings for each type of orb. You just gotta figure it out.
Just figure it out.
Yeah, just figure it out, guys.
You got Google.
But white is typically perceived as positive, as it is in
Everything.
in everything.
What's a bad orb look like?
Yeah.
Dark.
So
Dark
basically,
parallelogram.
It's
got
a bad
leopard
orb
print.
can show up as black or brown. Most
brown. Brown seems neutral to me. Well, brown's more of a neutral source.
They
to me.
mostly show up as like a black glowing light. Most associated with like a lower spiritual or heavy energy.
Is this my mom again?
You're throwing so much shade her way.
It's all right. She's not going to listen to this.
A lot of people, when they see these orbs, they interpret it as evil, and they kind of are unsafe and negative in nature, and that's what a lot of investigators have like pointed towards that as being evil. And then we move on to red or orange. Now, red and orange are usually associated with safety and security, as well as a sense of belonging. Some believe that these colored orbs are pretty much assuming the role of a protector. There really isn't much like research done on these color orbs, just because they're like, yeah, protecting. That's it. Like, and then I'm trying to think. Let's see. Green is associated with the heart, and it's also associated with nature, because green.
That makes sense.
Checks out.
The heart chakra,
Yeah.
which we'll go into chakras in another episode.
Yes, we will.
With a guest speaker. But yeah, the heart chakra, that's the color green. It's symbolized with green.
Amanda, have you seen orbs?
See, I'm very skeptical when it comes to orbs,
Same.
as most people are, because there's so many things you could write it off as. But I have seen one true orb.
The
in my
one
life.
true orb to rule them all.
At least I think. I was in, I don't remember where I was. I think I was in Indiana somewhere. And there was this body of water, and I was staring out into it. And then all of a sudden, I see this little green light out in the middle of the lake. And I'm like, oh, wait. What is that? And I'm like, maybe it's just my eyes playing games with me. Maybe I'm just really tired. And it started moving. And I was like, oh, okay. And then it just disappeared. Like, it wasn't a boat, because some of the boats that are on the lake had lights on them if it was dark. And wasn't a boat.
Was it a fish?
A fish with a green light?
Hey, man, you never know. There's that one, that angler fish?
Oh, my God.
Deep in the sea, he's got the little light bulb hanging on his head.
Indiana?
Hey, man.
I wasn't at the sea.
Hey, man.
Deep sea diving in the middle of Indiana.
Yeah.
Maybe someone had one, and they were, dumping in the...
That is weird, though. They do seem to just, show up and then disappear right away.
Yeah.
They don't last that long.
Yeah.
Is there anything in there about blue orbs?
There is,
Ooh,
actually.
'cause I have a story with that.
Yeah. Let me talk about that for a second. That was my next one. So then there's blue orbs. Blue orbs are usually associated with psychic energy and truth. Some also say it's like a spiritual guide. It can be a sign of a calming presence or energy, while it can also be that they're indicating that the presence of a spirit guide is in that location.
Well, let me tell you, when I saw my blue orb, is it the orb that's supposed to be calming, or is it supposed to have a calming effect on me? Because I was shitting myself.
I would assume it's going to be the orb itself.
Okay, because I wasn't calm. So my parents moved into the house that they're currently staying in, and with the house that they're currently staying in, they had a small guest house. And it's just this tiny little house. It's got one bedroom, like, kind of attached to it, and I was living there. I was the eldest, so they're like, yeah, you get this whole place to yourself. And when I first moved in, it had a lot of work that needed to be done. A lot of cleaning, a lot of stuff, because no one had been in there for years before we got there. So it was me and a friend, and it was late night, because we went there after we were done with class. And she was helping me clean, and we just so happened to be talking about our loved ones that had passed. I was talking about my friend, because this was a year after my friend had passed away, and she was talking about her mother who had passed away when she was very, very young. Well, as we're cleaning, out of the blue, all of the lights go out. All the lights go out. And they maybe were out for a good 45 seconds. 45 seconds? Felt a lot longer, but probably only 45 seconds. When the lights went back on, every single window covering was moving as if like a massive gust of wind came into the room and was like shaking everything. And we both just so happened to turn and look in the direction of the door, and there was this blue orb like hovering right above the door, and it went outside the door, and we even heard like the door, like as if something slammed into the door as it went out. Like, and I turned to look at her to be like, did you just see that? And she was just like, yeah, I just saw that. And she's like, well, we're going to change the subject right now, and we're just going to pretend it didn't happen. But it did happen. And later that night, I did go into my parents' house, and I asked them, I was like, did you guys lose electricity? And they're like, no, everything's fine out here. But yeah. And then in the months to come, I did end up having a spirit live in the house, Phantom Adam. And at first, Phantom Adam, well, I'll go into another episode with Phantom Adam because it's kind of a long story, but eventually, I guess, yeah, a blue orb you said was for, like, psychic guides and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It could have been a guide because immediately after that, that's when I really started to vamp up in my spiritual awakening. All of my dreams got more vivid, and my friend came to visit me more often, and I had an actual entity in the house, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
Lauren just learned more about herself.
You're welcome.
The more you know.
So are there any other color orbs that are any other colors?
Those are really the only ones that people talk about.
Okay.
There isn't like a chartreuse one or anything like that. So, yeah, it's just the basic color wheel that people really only talk about.
Okay. Well, why don't we talk about what could potentially cause a haunting or even a possession? People that have attachments, that have cords, and even demonic energy or demonic entities and elementals, it's not necessarily a reflection on the person who is having these things attached to them or around them. It can be. Like, if you're out there doing horrible things that's building up all of this karma and all of this horrible things, like, yeah, then you could potentially be opening yourself up to have things attach themselves to you. But that's not the case for everybody. You know, having a demonic entity take interest in you is not a reflection on your values. It doesn't mean you're a sinful person. It doesn't mean you're a saintly person. You know, it's that person is not to be judged. It can happen literally to anybody, just like anybody can catch the common cold, you know? And with that, the types of things that could potentially cause a haunting or a possession, right off the bat, we'll start with trauma. You know, something truly traumatic happens to you, or if it happens in an area. For example, we talked about the Battle of Gettysburg. all of that energy because of all that violence and all the deaths that happen in that area, you know, that can leave a mark, and that could potentially open itself up for there being a haunting, being spirits attached, or even just that residual energy. You know, if someone dies in a traumatic way, whether they're murdered or even in childbirth, there's a lot of stories that I've read where women who've died in childbirth in a home, it's not anything they could have done to prevent it, you know, it's just it happens, but they weren't ready to go yet. So a lot of them attach themselves to that home. They attach themselves to the area because they never finished what they wanted. They never got to see the child. They never got to do the stuff that they wanted to. So traumatic events could also open up for, you know, hauntings and whatnot. You know, you never see you never get like a happy place. Like, sure, you've got Disney World that has some of its stuff, but you never hear about like, oh, the person that was murdered at Disney World. And no, it's usually something that happens at home or in a dark alley or a basement, you know. Spiritual awakenings are a great one because you're opening up, you have all this energy that's radiating off you, you're having all these things happen, you're having visions, you're having vivid dreams, you know, you might even be having people who have passed away come back and visit you. When you have all this stuff happening, you're like a light that's all of a sudden just super, super bright, and all these other entities see you, and they go, hey, yeah, I want to go towards the light. It's like a moth to a flame. So spiritual awakenings can open up for certain things. And with spiritual awakenings, I know when I was growing up, part of what helped me be open to my spiritual awakening was my interest in the occult, was my interest in the paranormal. And especially now, we're in spooky season, and just, I know everyone is going to have that itch to pick up the Ouija board, start looking into tarot cards, and one of the biggest ways that someone can open themselves up to possession, to haunting, is the misuse of divination or oracular tools. If you are not someone that is well versed in how to use a Ouija board, or never learned how to read tarot cards or scrying, like, please, please, please do not just pick up these tools, because they are actual divination tools. You are actually playing around with something that could open up portals, that can open you up to those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
So,
be careful, kids.
And even though something is saying, yeah, it's good, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be good if you're not someone who's versed in this. You have no idea what you're doing. Another thing, even if you are versed, do never use a Ouija board by yourself.
do not do it by yourself.
I still have never used a Ouija board, and I've been interested in this stuff for years.
I have 2 at home. A custom one, too.
I have used a Ouija board twice. And both of those times, I did it with someone who is very, very experienced in the occult. Very experienced and knew exactly what she was doing. She set her boundaries up, and there were a couple times where there weren't so friendly entities coming out and trying to, you know, communicate, and she knew exactly what to do to keep them away, to back them off. And so definitely, if you're going to, or you're even curious about it, find someone who knows what they're doing, or do a lot of research. I know Hasbro has their Ouija boards that they sell for like $12, but even something like that. We can, in an episode, we'll go into the different backgrounds of divination. We can go into the different histories and how things came about and why they're used the way they are and what practices use them. Because some of the divination practices are actually a part of closed practices. And we'll do a little bit more on that, but just wanted to really preface it, especially because it's Halloween. You see that stuff everywhere. And that's a big one that definitely opens up a lot of people to stuff that they don't, everyone and their grandma's a witch during Halloween, and then November comes around and they go, okay, let's pack this all up and do it next year. Like, you can't get into these practices while looking down your nose at them. You have to know what you're doing, and everything that comes with that. So, incorrect and misuse of divination. Another thing could be, addictions. Addictions do open up certain things, drinking habits, alcohol use, because you are lowering your inhibitions, you're lowering your, basically, you do stuff that you wouldn't normally do when you're under the influence of things. So,
yes.
I can attest to that one.
We've all been there.
It breaks down your usual security, basically. So, extreme emotions, grief, distress, puberty, menopause, all of these, when you think about it, they have energy attached to it, especially grief. Grief's a big one. If an entity wants the best point to access your life, it's going to do it when you're at your lowest. It's going to happen when you're, when you feel like all hope is lost. And what's the quote? The devil doesn't show up in horns and a red cape. It shows up in everything you've ever wanted and all of your desires. That's usually how that is.
Yeah, that's why they usually disguise themselves as kids.
Yeah, because it's easy. You see a child.
Joke's on them. I'll punt that child.
So extreme emotions, huge life changes. People who are, as I like to call it, force sensitive. Those force sensitive folks, aka empaths, psychics.
I thought you were going to talk about Jedis there for a moment, and I was
if
like,
you classify yourself as a Jedi,
Jedis. Yes.
I'm a Sith Lord.
So people that are kind of, who understand certain things or who are just coming into those kinds of things, especially when you start hearing voices, people calling your name, trying to have conversations with you. And so, again, improper use of magic, the occult, dabbling into the negative magic, the black arts, if you believe in that stuff. Not every pagan practice believes in white magic, black magic, stuff like that. But, if you pick up the Necronomicon and are like, hey, let's do this, chances are you're going to summon something. But another thing too, and that kind of just goes with the whole, don't try this at home, kids. Watching TV shows who do these things. Like, I remember having sleepovers and trying light as a feather, stiff as a board.
Oh, that one.
Or lighting candles and being like, we're going to summon something tonight.
That gets me.
Jump in real quick. You're talking about doing things that you have no idea what you're doing. I grew up with my sister and her friends, and some of them, were practitioners of being Wiccan and things like that, but they were really new to it. But they figured, oh, well, we can do seances, and we'll try to talk to these spirits that are infesting your house. That only made things way worse, because none of us knew what we were doing. They pretty much read out of one book thinking, oh, okay, well, this says make a circle, light some candles, say this chant, and everything's going to be okay. Well, yeah, that's not how that really works. And I think they were really obsessed with the craft and thought, well, the craft says this is okay, so we can just do it this way. But yeah, pretty much it opened up a portal to allow more entities to just roam our house and wreak havoc. And after they did that, it took a long time for us to be able to like shut that stuff down and get it out of our house.
And when it comes to cleansing and getting, like, say you think you have an infestation, or you think you have an entity, whether it's a disincarnate spirit or a demonic entity haunting your house, or you think you have something attached to yourself, there's many different ways to help the situation. You can reach out to either your local paranormal investigators, see if if they can actually grab something or see what's happening and help you out. There are quite a few in this area that we live in. You know, we can even put some links in our episode notes to help you out with that. But definitely connecting with paranormal investigators would definitely help. There are mediums out there and people who can help cleanse, whether it's in person or remotely. If you think you have an attachment or anything like that, you could have a priest come, but that's for if you. I know in every movie it goes, oh, we have this coming in, like we have this haunting our house. Say it's a demon or something. We have this haunting our house, and we need someone to come and bless it. If you're an atheist or you're agnostic, and you have a clergyman of a specific religion coming to bless your house and it's not something you believe in, that's not going to do a damn thing. So it honestly depends. Like, if you believe in having a priest come to your house and bless it, by all means, contact your local priest, or how does that work? Contact your local church and see how that goes.
And if that doesn't work, just write to Dr. Phil.
But go ahead, seek that out. But it all depends on what you believe in and how that is. Sometimes people have their houses blessed and it doesn't do anything, because when you think about it, it's the main person, the person who really alpha of the house, if that makes sense. So sometimes it takes the person who the entity sees as the head of the house to say, hey, this is my space. It's not yours. You are not allowed here. And they cleanse the house that way. There's multiple outlets on how to do that. There's no easy get rid of spirits pill that anyone can swallow.
WikiHow. How to cleanse your house.
What are you talking about? YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube. Please, if you feel like you have anything and you have any questions, go ahead and reach out to us. Or if you have ghost stories and have experience with entities and whatnot, we would love to hear you. We would love to hear your story. So please, in the comments, email us, send us a message. Like, we would love to hear them. We can keep them to ourselves. We can read it on the air. We do eventually, like I said, we will be doing paranormal investigations on our own. Mm-hmm. It's just COVID has prevented us from doing that. We have reached out to a couple of different paranormal investigators that we will be having on the show to help give more insight on what it is to be a paranormal investigator, what kind of goes on. I know some of us watch actual paranormal TV shows.
Yes. All of them. Every single one of them.
So we'll get a little insight on what actually, like, what is just Hollywood, what is, in fact, like, what they go through. We should say this every episode. We are not professionals. We are 4 people who have each had individual experiences of our own. We do our research, and there's probably topics that we haven't spoken on in this episode. We will try and get to all of them eventually, but, you know, if you found a source that contradicts what we say, or you want us to elaborate on something, please let us know. We are completely open. As we said before, this is an experience for everybody. This is a learning experience for us. We want to share our experiences with you, and we would absolutely love for you to experience and share your stories with us too. Alright, well that concludes our second episode of Spooky Boy and the Spirit Sisters. Thank you so much for everyone who's still listening. Catch you guys later. Bye guys.
Stay spooky.
Goodbye.